Chapter 111 The Wind Rises at the End of the Pimpernel. Inside the room, the officials were gathering to look at the residents' newspaper, which clearly stated all the things that happened in the North, whether from the point of view of timeliness or richness of information. It was much more appealing than the newspaper that came out of the palace, not to mention that what was written on it was also the news of Qing's victory. Fan Xian bitterly smiled as he pulled out the crumpled newspaper from his pocket, and after saying sorry in his heart to old Mr. Pan Ling, the great calligrapher of the clerical pavilion, he resumed his seat at his own table and began to drink his tea. The bystanders were gleefully speaking about the war, and no one noticed his quietness. Instead, Lord Shaoqing looked at him with a slight smile and signaled for him to come out. Fan Xian walked out of the door with some trepidation and came to a secluded spot. This place was already deep in the courtyard, resting on a stone table and 2 stone chairs. Lord Shaoqing gestured for him to sit down, and then asked with a smile, "Everyone is happy, but June sits alone in silence. I wonder why." The young minister's name was Ren Shaoan, and he was a popular man back then, but after marrying a princess, he had been climbing up the ladder of the Taishang Temple in a peaceful manner. The situation Fan Xian faced today was somewhat the same. Fan Xian didn't confirm whether Lord Ren's heart was broken about something, so he had to come and pull himself together, so he couldn't say anything back, and only said with a faint smile, "It's a natural thing for the court to win this battle, so it's not much of a surprise." "Why is a natural thing?" Ren Shaoqing asked curiously. Fan Xian really didn't have any insight into military affairs, so he could only shrug it off and said, "Your Majesty is wise, the generals use their lives, and Northern Qi is weak, so it's natural for them to win the battle." Ren Shaoqing looked at him with a smile and said, "I just remembered that this time, the 2 countries are fighting again, but it has nothing to do with the assassination of Lord Fan." Fan Xian was stunned, and only then did he remember that one of the excuses for Qing to send troops to fight Qi and aid Zhao this time was that Northern Qi assassins had infiltrated Qing's Kyoto with the intention of murdering the minister's son. Thinking of those withered bones by the river above the northern border, and the empty women in the boudoirs of various states and counties waiting for a good man's wife, Fan Xian, for some unknown reason, felt a bit blocked in his heart, and sighed. Soldiers are ferocious weapons, and saints are not allowed to use them as a last resort. He knew that although Qing had been at peace for more than 10 years, the spirit of martial arts in his bones had not faded, so he paid close attention to what he was covering up on weekdays, but in front of Ren Shaoqing, he thought that it was just a casual conversation, so he casually said something. Ren Shaoqing seemed to appreciate his remark and nodded, "Although this is the case, but this time there is a lot of land gained, and there are several years of peace in Qing, so it's worth it." Fan Xian was not a sour pacifist and acknowledged this fact with a smile. Ren Shaoqing added, "Although all the battle credit goes to His Majesty the General, the Imperial Court has been secretly planning for this matter for 2 months, which is quite exhausting." Fan Xian immediately tasted something else in these words, knowing that Lord Shaoqing was saying that the civilian system in the court had also contributed a lot to the war effort. After all, Fan Xian had had 2 lives of experience and knew that fighting a war was ultimately about logistics, so he said sincerely, "All the adults in the court also deserve great credit." Ren Shaoqing smiled with satisfaction, then said, "Lord Chancellor and you are about to become son-in-law. If you have free time, you still need to go up to the mansion more often to pay your respects to be more appropriate." "That's natural, thank you for reminding Lord Shaoqing." A cold sweat ran down Fan Xian's back. He was about to marry Wanner, but he hadn't visited his future in-laws yet. This was really a bit untenable. It was just that this should be a bright and honorable interaction between the Lin and Fan mansions, so why would Ren Shaoqing want to talk to himself in private? Fruit otherwise, Ren Shaoqing said softly, "Teacher wishes you to go and sit in the Xianfu alone, and doesn't want to startle too many people." Fan Xian fearfully led the way. On the second day of the court, there were flattering words, the military was rewarded a lot, and the 4 departments of the supervisory yuan were also rewarded by an explicit decree because of their good intelligence. However, to everyone's surprise, the Ministry of Household Minister Sinan Bo Fanjian out of the speech, the victory, thanks to the Prime Minister's exhaustive efforts, the first state affairs and then family affairs, dredging logistics, food, and grass. Really a great success. The minister's clamor did not understand the original political rivals, why today so harmonious, but a thought of the marriage of the two families suddenly realized. More unexpected in the back of the crowd, originally has been the Chancellor of the Ministry of Rights Secretary Guiyoji, but spoke out against how. The most unexpected is. Qin Pingping went to the court. When His Majesty asked, he sat in a wheelchair and whispered 4 words, Prime Minister hard. So far, the political enemies who had been using the matter of Wu Bowen's collusion with Northern Qi to keep attacking the Chancellor were quiet all of a sudden, and His Majesty the Emperor decreed that he would be consoled, and Lin Ruofu had regained his footing. And the dynasty and the countryside were rumored that the Chancellor had fallen to the second prince because of his marriage with the Fan family. The second prince, who was originally completely unassisted in the dynasty, had instantly become a hot figure. No one knew that behind all these great events, in fact, it was just a casual conversation between the depressed Ren Shaoqing of the Taishan Temple and the Taishan Temple's 8th-ranked conciliator under the courtyard wall. By selling himself to his old husband once, a great deal, Fan Xian's heart felt slightly more secure, although still very afraid of the Chancellor to find out that Lin Ergongzi was killed by his own shouting. But it was not like in the first 2 months that always avoided. The temple's duties do not need to go every day, only at 10 days to go to the dawn on the good. This day afternoon Fan Xian rode in a carriage to the royal courtyard. Now that his marriage to the girl in the compound was well known throughout the capital, and because of the Fan family's generosity, the guards were turning a blind eye to the situation. Fan Xian and his sister walked inside together, not in the mood to look at the wildflowers and weeds in the garden, but just following the stone path to the small building. Fan Ruo was a bit surprised. Brother is quite familiar with the path here. Fan Xian smiled faintly and said, I have a good memory, it's not like you don't know. In his heart, he laughed secretly. He would walk in and out of this garden 2 or 3 nights out of 10, so it was really hard for him not to be familiar with it. Unfortunately, according to the rules, he, the future county princess son-in-law, still can't see Lin Wanner in the courtyard, had to sit downstairs to drink tea. Ruo went up alone. He is not in a hurry, anyway, night and day can see the fiancé, not in a hurry. After a while, 2 people came down, and when he saw the girl behind Ruo, Fan Xian's eyes lit up. The girl's eyes were clear and bright, and her eyebrows were slightly thick, but she didn't look rude. Instead, she was very spirited, and she was the only daughter of Yi Chong, the lord of Kyoto's guards, Yi Linger. When Yi Linger saw a strange man waiting downstairs, she was slightly surprised. Fan Xian already smiled and rose to greet her, arching his hand and saying, Miss Yi, it's been a long time. As soon as the words left his mouth, Fan Xian knew that something was wrong. When he saw Yi Linger, he put on makeup and used the identity of a doctor. Today, he came to the hospital to visit, and opened his mouth to say that he hadn't seen her for a long time, so he was afraid that Yi Linger would be suspicious. Out of his expectation, Yi Linger just looked at him lightly, curtsy a blessing, said, See Fan Gongzi. Seeing that she knew her identity and wasn't surprised by what she had said earlier, Fan Xian knew that Wanner must have told this bosom friend about their relationship, and smiled and said, Thanks to the company of a girl, Wanner is not bored on her deathbed. So Fan Xian would like to thank her. Yi Linger said with a cold look, Mr. Fan is polite. Seeing that this woman didn't seem to like him very much, Fan Xian wasn't too annoyed. He didn't think that with his pretty face, he could make all the women in the world hold an innate fondness for him, so he just smiled faintly, bowed again, and turned to Ruo and said, How's the matter of the questioning going? Fan Ruo guffawed. You're in a hurry for this, Sister Lin said. Fan Xian suddenly waved his hand and smiled, A little bit about your own family, it's better to go home and talk about it. Yi Linger burst into a rage at these words, thinking that this Fan Xian was indeed a narrow-minded person. The meaning of these words was too obvious, meaning that the affairs of the 2 Fan Lin families didn't need more involvement from her own family name, Yi. She said angrily, Mr. Fan, don't be too deceitful in what you say and do. Fan Xian was stunned, thinking where did this come from? Why is this girl so grumpy? With some inexplicable annoyance in his heart, he was too lazy to pay attention to her, and holding his sister's hand, he walked outside the mansion. Walking to the outside of the courtyard, Yi Linger also went out of the mansion with the maids and subordinates, and looked at Fan Xian pulling Fan Ruo's hand, and laughed coldly. Fan Xian didn't understand, still holding Ruo's slightly cold little hand and waiting for the carriage to come over, but Ruo's face became a little embarrassed. It was true. It wasn't often that siblings were as close and anonymous to each other as they were in the world, and it wasn't as if Fan Xian was paying attention to this very often. Looking at his sister's expression, Fan Xian finally figured it out, thinking how that woman always pestered himself. Between him and Ruo is naturally bright and clear, so instead, he was particularly angry. Turning back to Yi Linger and asked with a frown, "Miss Yi, is it true that you don't have an adult at home to discipline you, so you stroll around in Kyoto and Dingzhou every day?" Yi Linger didn't realize that her unintentional sneer had provoked such a vicious verbal attack from the other party, and angrily scolded, "Who did you say has no upbringing? Who said that?" Fan Xian smiled gently. "No one here seems to have said that." Seeing him play the rogue, Yi Linger was even more furious and yelled, "Then you are still strolling around Kyoto every day. You are about to get married, but you still don't have a proper form, and I haven't seen you go to the Taishan Temple a couple of times. Do you also have no adults at home to teach you?" Fan Xian's temperament is gentle with a few hints of killing, but more is wilting bad, knowing that if he is not angry, the other side will be more angry, so more gentle, said, "I came to visit my fiancée, and the sense of reason is reasonable. Miss Yi befriends my one heir and visits from time to time. I have already thanked her. I just hope you can pay attention to your words and stop trying to stir up the relationship between our own families." Yi Linger's lips tossed in anger, and when she heard the other party play this trick again, she hated it and said, "With a dude like you, I don't know what Wanna sees in you." Fan Xian sighed and said, "Where am I a dude?" Yi Linger said hatefully, "You're not good at writing, you're not good at martial arts, and you're not good at being a playboy?" Fan Xian smiled shamefully and said, "I hate boasting, but it is rumored in the capital that I am a good writer and a good martial artist, and that I am able to write poems in 7 steps and kill people in 7 steps, so I am a little bit fluttery, and I am thankful for being awakened by the girl's words today." Seeing him make a gesture, Yi Linger only thought of the other party's talent name, gaspingly stomping her feet, not knowing what to say. Suddenly will be so red to the extreme thin lips a bite, hand holding on the waist side of the knife. After a few times of thinking, finally removed the knife, threw in front of Fan Xian on the land, issued a thud of a crispy sound.